The answer is simple. You said it yourself, because of who's on that list.
A congressman just told the director of the FBI to his face that his own words convict him. No accusation, no theory, no leaked memo. His own voice played back at him in a room full of cameras and staffers and a nation still reeling from a summer of political violence. Somewhere in the last 7 months, the man in that chair went from demanding the truth to burying it. And the question hanging over this entire hearing is simple. What changed? This is the moment nobody in that room saw coming, not because it was loud, but because it was quiet. Two men are about to collide. On one side, a ranking member who has sent 8 letters that were never answered and who has spent months building a case in silence. On the other, an FBI director who once said, on a podcast, on the record, exactly why a list of names was never released, long before he ever had the power to release it himself. By the end of this hearing, one of those two men will not be able to look at his own past statements the same way again. Keep watching, because the answer to what changed is sitting inside his own testimony, and he says it without realizing it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Director Patel. You and I have not had the opportunity to meet, and alas, you failed to respond to the 8 oversight letters I've sent you over the last 7 months. So we do have a lot of questions piling up for you, but I want to start with a word of praise.
8 letters, 0 replies. That is the ground this hearing is built on, before a single real question is even asked. And Raskin does not open with anger, he opens with something colder, praise.
The first FBI director was J. Edgar Hoover, who steadfastly refused to hire women, African Americans, and other minorities as agents. And although he was a closeted homosexual who lived in domestic partnership for decades with Clyde Tolson, he also participated in anti-gay crusades. He aggressively promoted what we would today call white Christian nationalism, and he would undoubtedly be turning over in his grave to see as one of his successors a first-generation Indian American and a proud Hindu. So I congratulate you on being a breakthrough in this sense and being a beneficiary of the civil rights movement that opened up the FBI and the federal workforce to lots of people who never would have been hired in its first decades. Alas, you share J. Edgar Hoover's dangerous obsession with blind loyalty over professionalism and effective public policy. For Hoover, it was blind loyalty to him in keeping his secrets. For you, it's blind loyalty to Donald Trump in keeping his secrets.
It is a compliment built like a trap. Praise the man for breaking a barrier Hoover would have hated, then hand him Hoover's worst habit. And Raskin is not finished setting the scene. He has receipts on how this director got the job in the first place.
During your confirmation, it was widely noted on all sides that your primary qualification was your unwavering loyalty to Trump. Unlike other directors, you had no work experience at the FBI, but you had made over 1,000 media and political appearances in support of Trump's campaign. Your Senate confirmation vote was 51-49, the closest in history, with your opponents warning you were not qualified and had no interest in actually developing the qualifications for the job. I hoped that they were wrong.
51-49, the closest confirmation vote for an FBI director in the history of the position. Half the Senate went on record saying this man was not ready. 7 months later, Raskin is about to argue they were right, using the director's own book as evidence.
But you did write a picture book trilogy for children ages 5 and up based on your experience clashing with President Trump's political enemies. In your book, you describe your literary alter ego, Kash the Knight, as a wacky, easily bored wizard carrying out King Donald's vengeance by driving his enemies out of the kingdom. In the books, King Donald is besieged by the evil Hillary Queentown, but saved in the end by Kash. Then Kash goes on to catch mules who are stealing the 2020 election for the great King Donald from Sleepy Joe. And then in the third book, Kash takes down the Dragon of the Jalapenos, nicknamed the DOJ. Your supporters had hoped that you would graduate from imagining yourself a romantic fairy tale knight to actually running America's premier federal law enforcement agency. Alas, just as we've learned how dangerous it is to put a science-denying anti-vaxxer in charge of our public health. We've learned how dangerous it is to name as director of the FBI a man who thinks of himself as a fairy tale knight who keeps a fire-breathing dragon named DOJ at home to forcibly drive villains out of the kingdom.
Read that back slowly. The head of the FBI wrote himself into a children's story as a knight who hunts down the president's enemies for him. Raskin isn't mocking a book, he's building a record that says this man saw the job as loyalty before it was ever anything else. And that record is about to run straight into the worst week of Patel's tenure.
When Charlie Kirk was assassinated while his killer was still on the loose, you decided you didn't need to be at FBI headquarters in Washington to work with your team while the chaotic manhunt unfolded. You spent your evening dining in a swanky Midtown Manhattan restaurant and tweeting out false information that the subject of the shooting was in custody, a statement you had to retract 1 hour later.
A national manhunt underway, a false claim broadcast to the country, and the man running the investigation was not at his desk. Raskin says even Patel's own allies noticed.
Culture warrior Christopher Rufo, who just a few months ago sat in your chair as a Republican witness, observed that you performed terribly, and he called for your ouster.
When your own side starts calling for your removal, that is not a talking point. That is a warning sign. And 4 minutes in, Raskin shifts gears completely. He stops talking about one bad night and starts talking about a pattern, and that pattern reaches into the Bureau itself.
You've been systematically purging the FBI of its most experienced and qualified agents, division leaders, and experts in counter-terror, counterintelligence, and cybersecurity, precisely the people who have the expertise you lack and which the FBI and the country need. They've been expelled from the ranks of the Bureau simply because they did their duty investigating crimes, including those committed by the mob that attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and beat the hell out of more than 140 police officers, or simply because you suspected them of being insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump.
More than 140 police officers beaten on January 6th. The agents who investigated that attack, according to Raskin, are the ones now being pushed out the door, not for failing at their jobs, for doing them. And one name in particular is about to make that pattern feel personal.
We illegally sacked Brian Driscoll, the former acting director of the Bureau and a decorated counterterrorism expert who worked at the FBI for nearly 20 years. According to Driscoll, you told him your own job, quote, depended on the removal of agents who worked on the cases against the president, regardless of whether the agents chose to work on those cases or not. You added, quote, the FBI tried to put the president in jail, and he hasn't forgotten it.
According to his own testimony, a nearly 20-year veteran was told his job depended on purging agents who investigated the president. Not on performance, not on the law, on revenge. Raskin has one more name to add before he ever says the word Epstein, and this one lands only weeks before the country needed her most.
You forced out the leader of the Salt Lake City field office, Mehtab Saeed, just weeks before Charlie Kirk's assassination, depriving the FBI of an experienced counterterrorism expert described by her colleagues as absolutely the best and legendary. She would have led the FBI's manhunt had she not been fired.
The one person colleagues called the best in the building, removed weeks before the manhunt that needed her most. 3 names, 3 careers, and a pattern Raskin has now laid out piece by piece that loyalty to one man now outweighs everything the Bureau is supposed to protect, from counterterrorism to the officers who defended the Capitol itself. And that accusation is about to collide with the single word this entire video is built around.
Before you got in this job, you called for full release of the Epstein files, telling podcaster Benny Johnson that the only reason the list was not released by DOJ and FBI was, quote, because of who's on that list.
Say that again. Before he ran the FBI, Kash Patel said on a podcast, in his own words, that the Epstein list was being hidden because of who was on it. That quote did not come from an opponent. It came from him. And now he runs the agency holding that exact list.
Upon your confirmation, you promised that, quote, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned. And anyone from the prior or current Bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued. This spring, you ordered hundreds of agents to pore over all the Epstein files, but not to look for more clues about the money network or the network of human traffickers. You pulled these agents from their regular counterterrorism or drug trafficking duties to work around the clock, some of them sleeping at their desks, to conduct a frantic search to make sure Donald Trump's name and image were flagged and redacted wherever they appeared, whether an email, a text, a letter, an interview, a photograph, or a video. In May, Attorney General Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name had indeed appeared multiple times throughout the Epstein files. And not long thereafter, in July, you and the Attorney General released a memo claiming that, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. In a few short months, how did you go from being a crusader for accountability and transparency for the Epstein files to being a part of the conspiracy and cover-up? The answer is simple. You said it yourself, because of who's on that list.
No cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned. That was the promise, on the record, at his own confirmation. Raskin isn't inventing a contradiction, he's reading it out loud, in the director's own words, from two different points in the same year. And there is one more document he puts on the table before he ever lets Patel speak.
A week ago, the Oversight Committee released Trump's disturbing birthday book, Note to Epstein, written over a drawing of a woman's naked body, referring to a, quote, wonderful secret. The Oversight Committee obtained the note from the Epstein estate, not from the FBI, raising questions again of whether the FBI has been withholding documents.
Not from the FBI, from the estate. The agency sitting on the entire case could not or would not produce that document itself. Before Raskin sits down, he widens the lens one more time. And this part is not about Epstein at all. It is about what he says this cover-up is costing the country while it drags on.
While you're unleashing the FBI to cater to Trump's desire to shut down the Epstein inquiry, the first 9 months of the Trump presidency have seen a spate of political violence and domestic terror events. We saw deadly attacks on political figures on both the left and the right. The brutal assassination of Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the attempted murder of Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, who miraculously survived a combined 17 gunshots. We saw an arsonist set Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence on fire. And of course, last week, we saw the horrific, cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah that has shaken the nation. 1 minute after Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, a 16-year-old shooter in Evergreen, Colorado, radicalized by white supremacist ideology online, opened fire and critically wounded 2 other students at Evergreen High School. We've seen lethal anti-Semitic violence, including the murder of 2 young Israeli embassy staffers just blocks from the Capitol.
A sitting House Speaker's husband, a governor's home set on fire, 2 embassy staffers, Charlie Kirk. Raskin isn't listing tragedies at random. He's arguing that while the Bureau spends its energy protecting one man's name in one set of files, the country around it kept burning. Then he delivers his closing line, and it does not sound like a talking point. It sounds like a verdict already written.
I'm afraid, Director Patel, you've given us reason to believe you've used the powers of the FBI to serve Donald Trump and his agenda of partisan retribution. You've broken your promise not to do that. You've betrayed Jeffrey Epstein's victims and survivors. You've turned your back on the career law enforcement officers of the FBI, and as a result, you've left all of us less safe than before.
Betrayed the victims, left the country less safe. That is the charge, 11 and a half minutes in without a single interruption. Now the man it was aimed at has to stand up, take the oath, and answer for every second of it. The question is no longer what Raskin said. The question is what Patel does with it.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Raskin, and members of the committee. I want to begin today by discussing the appalling assassination of Charlie Kirk.
Notice the order, not the letters, not the list, not the quote about who's on it. Patel opens with Charlie Kirk, the one subject in the entire opening statement built to generate sympathy instead of scrutiny.
At approximately 5 p.m. local time, I arrived on the ground and walked the crime scene myself, and we flew multiple FBI assets in and out to process DNA simultaneously while bringing in evidence response technicians, hostage rescue teams, and other experts to assist state and local law enforcement with their investigation. At 8 p.m. local on September 11th, the FBI collected and populated and promulgated at a press conference a video of the suspect on the grounds. We also released enhanced images. Due to that release that I directed and ordered, the suspect involved was apprehended and in custody at 10 p.m. local time. That's less than 2 hours after we did the video release and the photo release. So within 33 hours, that individual suspect was in custody.
A fast timeline told entirely in his own words, with himself at the center of every verb. He arrived, he directed, he ordered. According to his own testimony, it does not touch a single letter Raskin sent or a single document Raskin named. Then Patel pivots into what this hearing is really about for him, and the room's energy changes completely.
Under this administration, the FBI has arrested more than 23,000 violent criminals. 23,000 in 7 months. That's twice as many year to date last year. We've taken over 6,000 firearms off the streets. 6,000 guns are no longer in the hands of criminals in 7 months. We've identified and found and located 4,700 child victims.
4 numbers in under 30 seconds. This is not an answer to Raskin's letters. It is a wall built out of statistics, and it keeps getting taller.
We are also working 24/7, 365 on the opioid epidemic that is killing more than hundreds of thousands of people a year. We have seized 1,600 kilograms of fentanyl off the streets so far in 7 months. Year to date, 25% increase. To put that in perspective, that's enough to kill a third of the American population, 120 million Americans. 100,000 kilograms of cocaine and meth gone off the streets. Earlier this year, I highlighted in Cincinnati, Ohio, how we're getting creative to chase down those that were willing to do harm to our citizens, not just by striking at the heart of the fentanyl producers, but the fentanyl precursor companies in China. And
Enough fentanyl to kill a third of the country, according to his own numbers. It is a genuinely staggering statistic. It is also, once again, not a single word about the 8 unanswered letters sitting on Raskin's desk. Every fact Patel offers is real. None of them are the fact he was actually asked for.
in just 7 months, we are on track to produce the lowest murder rate in modern U.S. history by double digits. Those are results not of mine. Those are results of the men and women of the FBI. If you want to criticize me, bring it on, but do not attack the brave leaders in the field.
Listen to the move. The credit goes to the agents. The criticism, he redirects at himself, but only after making sure it can't land on the people actually doing the work. It is a well-built shield, and it sets up the number he clearly came prepared to say out loud, the one meant to end the conversation about transparency before it starts.
In the counterintelligence space alone, this year, year to date, 30% increase in counterintelligence arrests from the DPRK, Russia, Iran, and China.
Espionage arrests up 30%, cyber indictments up 20%. On paper, this is a director talking about real national security work. But every one of these numbers is also doing a second job, filling the clock so there is less time left for the questions Raskin actually came to ask.
And this is what I've done in my 7 months at the helm. We've produced more than 33,000 pages of documents to Congress to a variety of committees, including, I believe, 7,500 to this committee alone, if memory serves me correct. To put the 33,000 in perspective, my predecessor in 7 years produced 13,000 pages in total to the United States Congress. His predecessor in 4 years produced 3,000 pages in total. I repeat, I have produced 33,000 pages in 7 years to this Congress and will continue to do so.
33,000 pages. It sounds like an answer. It sounds like proof. But page count is not the same as content. And Raskin never asked how many pages Patel produced. He asked why one specific name kept disappearing from them. Let's restate what is actually still unanswered here. Not whether the FBI is busy, not whether crime is down. The only question that matters is the one Patel has not touched once in 9 minutes. Why he now defends the very silence he once condemned.
We even went to court and asked the judges to lift those prosecutorial agreements and to lift those court order seals, and they denied us 3 times. Congress is welcome to do the same and join the fight.
To be fair, this is the strongest card Patel plays all morning. Courts, not the FBI, blocked 3 separate attempts to unseal Epstein material, according to his testimony. It is a real defense, and it deserves to be heard as one. But it is also not an answer to the specific words Raskin quoted back at him. A sealed court order explains why some pages stay hidden. It does not explain the podcast interview where Patel, in his own voice, said the real reason was who was on the list. And that is exactly the moment he finally reaches, because he has no choice left.
On the Epstein case, the original sin on the Epstein case was how it was handled by Mr. Acosta when he first brought the case in 2006, 7, and 8. The original case had a very limited search warrant, had a very limited search window, had a very limited investigative window. I was not there when those search warrants and that investigation was launched. I would not have done it that way. They were limited to only 3 to 4 years of investigations from 97 to approximately 2001 and 2002 to 2005. Mr. Acosta allowed Mr. Epstein to enter into a plea agreement where he served weekend jails for trafficking minor women.
Listen to what just happened. Raskin asked about a podcast quote from before Patel took the job. Patel answered with a plea deal from 2008, under a different administration, under a different director, 17 years ago. Not one word about the podcast, not one word about the confirmation promise, not one word about who's on the list. This is the moment the open loop closes. And it doesn't close with an answer, it closes with a director walking straight past the one question that actually mattered.
And I'd lastly like to focus on operation that the president led in D.C. Because of this, we are taking this fight in D.C. to every single city across the country. 2,100 arrests in the last month alone. D.C. has seen a 60% decrease in gun crimes, 75% decrease in carjackings, and 53% decrease in homicides in our nation's capital. And rightly so. We're bringing that fight to the streets of America. I want to thank you for your support, and I'm proud to be the director that leads this FBI into a new headquarters building that they've needed for decades, saving the taxpayer $3.5 billion, and also providing our workforce a safe environment. If you don't know the calamity that is the Hoover building, I invite each and every one of you to walk around. I'll give you a tour myself, and you can see where the cement falls on the heads of our employees that is only to be saved by netting. Just to give you an example. Thank you for support to our mission. And I do want to highlight one thing about DC. And, we are working to bring them justice. And Mr. Chairman, in my 16 years, now my 17 years of government service, if anyone has any questions about my service, bring it on.
Yeah. Thank you, Director. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule. The chair recognizes the...
Notice where Patel goes next. Not back to Epstein, not back to the podcast quote. On to Washington crime statistics and a genuinely tragic case involving a murdered intern. Nobody is disputing that these numbers are real or that this case matters to the family involved. But watch the pattern. Every time the topic could circle back to who's on that list, it moves somewhere else instead. Bring it on. Those are the last words out of his mouth before the 5-minute rounds even begin, and they are aimed straight at the man who just spent 11 and a half minutes building the case against him. He is daring the committee to keep going. But the record already shows what happened when someone did. Jamie Raskin didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need a single new document. He used Kash Patel's own words from before he ever held the badge and placed them next to the promises Patel made after he did. The gap between those two men, the podcast guest and the sworn director, is the story of this entire hearing. And by the time Patel sat back down, that gap had not closed. It had a name attached to it, one only he refuses to say. What would you have asked him if you had 5 minutes in that room and his own words sitting right in front of you?